At first, this film Outbreak might seem like a typical zombie-style horror movie, but in the end, it delivers a surprisingly shocking twist. The story begins at a place called Morning Rock Park. Two rangers, Chief Mike Cortez and Neil Morris, arrive to deal with an infected dog. When they reach the spot, they find the dog locked inside a truck container. Mike tells Neil to cover him and to take action if the dog attacks. Neil agrees. But when the dog suddenly charges at Mike, Neil freezes and can't pull the trigger. The dog manages to bite Mike, but a third ranger, John Gibson, quickly steps in and ends the threat from a distance. Mike is angry, but he understands why Neil failed. Neil has been going through a tough time. His teenage son has disappeared, and despite days of searching, there's still no sign of him. Because of this stress, Neil hasn't been able to focus on his work properly, and Mike quietly forgives him. Mike decides not to report the injury at the station because he doesn't want to deal with extra paperwork. They leave the dog's body for John Gibson to handle and start driving back. In the car, Mike tells Neil that he understands the pain he and his wife are going through and suggests that Neil should take some time off. Neil is actually thinking about quitting the ranger job completely, but Mike tells him not to make that decision now and to just rest for a while. Back at the ranger station, Mike gets basic treatment for his wound. His daughter Olivia is worried and tells him he should get proper medical care, but Mike insists he's already vaccinated, so there's no danger of rabies. Olivia was also a friend of Neil's missing son, Ben. Seeing Neil sad, she goes to talk to him and returns Ben's watch to him, along with a comforting hug. Later, when Neil is heading home with John Gibson, we see a warning sign showing that rabies has spread in nearby areas. John keeps talking during the drive, but Neil remains quiet. Ever since his son disappeared, he has barely spoken to anyone. After a while, Neil tells John that he wants to walk the rest of the way home. Even though the distance is still long, John tries to start a conversation, but Neil says talking won't change anything. John still tells him that if he ever wants to search for Ben again, he will help. He just needs a clue to follow Neil quietly, thanks him, and walks away toward home, carrying his gun with him. At home, we see his wife Abby, who still hasn't recovered from their son's disappearance. She spends most of her time sleeping or taking calming pills. Things between the couple aren't going well, but they are still trying to support each other. Abby has placed Ben's photos and belongings on the table. When Neil tries to move them, she stops him and says these memories help her hold on to hope. She still believes Ben might return, or that they should keep searching. This leads to a small argument, and Neil goes to bed. The next morning, he wakes up alone. Abby is sleeping on the couch, showing how fragile their marriage has become. Neil looks at his gun and then goes into the woods. We see quick flashbacks hinting that Ben left home because of some issue, but the full story isn't revealed yet. Neil sits by a lake, lost in thought. He remembers the day he gave Ben the family's old analog watch, a moment that now hurts him deeply. Overwhelmed with emotion, Neil throws the watch into the water. He then pulls out his gun, thinking of ending everything. But before he can do anything, he hears a girl screaming for help. She is drowning in the lake. Neil jumps into the water and manages to rescue the girl, pulling her to the shore. But when he sees her face, he is shocked. Her skin and body look badly damaged, and she seems infected. In a sudden burst, she attacks Neil and tries to harm him. Neil defends himself and ends the threat by hitting her with a stone. it becomes clear that the girl was infected with some unknown virus, and she was no longer fully human, more like a zombie-type creature. Terrified, Neil rushes home and tries calling for help on the radio, but he can't reach anyone. On his way back, he sees more infected people wandering around, and he realizes the entire town, maybe even the whole world, might be facing the same outbreak. Abby is asleep when Neil gets home. He wakes her up, telling her they need to leave immediately because something terrible has started. Neil checks his gun, but it has no bullets. And there's no ammo in the house. Either Abby had thrown all the bullets away earlier because she was scared Neil might hurt himself out of grief. Suddenly, an infected person enters the house. Neil fights back and stops the threat. More sounds follow, and another infected breaks in, but Neil manages to deal with that one too. Abby is still half dazed from her medication, but Neil gets her to the car and decides to escape the area. While driving through town, Neil sees that many people have turned infected and are attacking the few remaining survivors. Abby sits in the back seat, barely fully awake, while Neil tells her that everything has gone out of control. Neil now understands that the virus is spreading extremely fast, and crowded places are no longer safe. So he drives to a quiet, isolated spot to think about what to do next. Abby is still unaware of what's happening outside because she was half unconscious. When she wakes up and asks why Neil looks scared, he tells her that a dangerous virus is turning people into zombie-like creatures, and they must protect themselves. Abby doesn't believe him and says people can't just turn infected suddenly. Neil explains that rabies had already been spreading in their town, and maybe this outbreak is connected. He has no answers yet, but they need to stay safe. Neil tries calling 911 and reaching anyone on the radio, but nothing works. Abby is confused. They decide to return home to collect important supplies. Neil tells Abby to stay in the car while he goes inside. After gathering essentials, he returns, but Abby is missing. Panicking, Neil rushes inside and finds her in Ben's room. Abby says she won't leave the house because Ben might return and they might miss him. Neil tells her the place isn't safe anymore. Abby insists on leaving a note for Ben first. When Neil asks her again about the bullets, she admits she threw all of them away because she was worried about him. This leads to another argument. While Abby gathers some of Ben's belongings, Neil tries contacting John through the radio. But before he can explain anything, the radio suddenly cuts out. Neil takes Abby and leaves the house, planning to go to Mike for help. On the way, their gas starts running low, so Neil stops near a gas station. He parks a little distance away and tells Abby to stay inside the car. He warns her that if he doesn't return, she must run and save herself. Neil carefully enters the station. The counter is empty, so he grabs 2 fuel cans, a lighter, and a pack of cigarettes. Just then, a gas station worker puts a hand on Neil's shoulder. He is infected. Shocked, Neil pulls away, and before the man can harm him, Neil uses the fuel to stop the threat and escape. Meanwhile, John reaches the location Neil mentioned earlier over the radio. The place where the infected girl attacked him, John finds her body and is shaken by what he sees. Back at the gas station, Neil drives the car closer so he and Abby can load more supplies, especially food. Abby spots the burnt body outside, but Neil tells her not to look. They both collect essential items from inside. Before leaving, Neil places money on the counter. Even in this chaos, he refuses to take anything without paying. Or maybe there's another reason behind this, which becomes clear only at the end. Meanwhile, John grows worried about Neil and goes to his house. There, he finds the bodies inside and tries to contact Neil again, but still gets no response. During the drive, Abby asks Neil what these infected people have become. Neil says it's hard to explain, but the infection has turned them extremely aggressive, almost like monsters that only want to attack. They continue their journey. Abby apologizes for throwing away the ammo and explains she only did it because she was afraid Neil might hurt himself out of grief for Ben. She promises that from now on she will stay strong and support him so they can survive this situation together. Her words give Neil a bit of relief. After a long drive, they finally reach Mike's house. Neil gives Abby a knife for protection and tells her to stay in the car while he carefully enters the house to look for help. Neil calls out for Mike and his wife, and soon sees Camilla in the kitchen. But as he steps closer, she turns toward him. Her face shows she is infected. She suddenly attacks him. During the struggle, Neil spots some bullets on the floor, loads his gun, and ends the threat. The gunshot is loud, and Abby rushes inside even though Neil told her to stay in the car. At the same moment, Olivia, Mike's daughter, attacks Neil. She is infected as well. Before Neil can react, Abby arrives and begs him not to hurt her, but then Mike himself appears and attacks Neil, forcing Neil to defend himself. Neil shoots Mike too. When Neil looks back, Abby and Olivia have run out of the house. Neil follows them, trying to catch up, but slips and blacks out. He dreams of Ben, but in the dream, Ben has also turned into a zombie-like figure. When Neil wakes up, it's morning, and he finds himself surrounded by several infected people, including some wearing ranger uniforms. His own team, Neil manages to trick one infected ranger into stepping into a bear trap, then fights off the others and escapes. He finally reaches Abby. She looks fine at first, but the moment she sees Neil, her behavior changes. She becomes aggressive, as if she too is now infected. Neil somehow manages to control Abby and gets her into the car. He fastens her with the seatbelt so she can't hurt herself or anyone else. He still doesn't want to abandon her. After driving for a while, he stops the car. He's completely lost. He doesn't know what to do next, because Abby also seems infected now. Meanwhile, John is still searching for Neil. Neil finally reaches John on the radio, but something strange happens. John can hear Neil clearly, but Neil can't understand John's words. The voices sound broken and unclear. The reason behind this becomes clear later. Neil goes to a nearby spot where the radio signal is stronger. There's a small radio tower, and he climbs it carefully, but an infected person is already up there. After a short struggle, Neil uses the man's own gun to stop him. Neil then uses the radio to contact the hospital, but the same problem appears again. He can hear voices, but he cannot understand what the other side is saying. He only catches one thing. They're telling him to stay where he is. Neil knows he must find a cure for Abby, no matter what. Neil can't stop now. He has to keep moving. On the way, he finally reaches John again on the radio. Hearing John's voice makes him emotional. This time, John tells him he can still help and asks Neil to bring Abby back home. Neil follows the instructions and returns to his house, where police cars are already parked outside. He immediately realizes John is there. Neil takes Abby out of the car. She now looks fully infected. But the moment John steps out of the house, Neil is shocked John and all the other rangers look infected too, as if they've also turned into zombie-like creatures. Panicking, Neil points his gun at John, but before he can act, a shot hits Neil's arm. He falls to the ground, and his eyes land on a mirror nearby. What he sees freezes him. He himself looks infected in the reflection. And right here, the movie reveals its major plot twist. There was no real virus. There were no real zombies. All of this was happening inside Neil's mind. He was experiencing a complete psychotic breakdown. Neil was already deeply depressed after losing his son. And now, the truth finally comes out. Ben was never missing. He had already passed away. The day Ben tried to run away, Neil chased him up a hill. While trying to stop him, Ben slipped and fell. Neil blamed himself completely. Ben was still lying there, injured, but Neil's mind couldn't accept what had happened. His brain shut out the truth. In his shock and guilt, he literally could not see Ben's body, as if his mind erased it. This trauma pushed him into a severe mental breakdown. Neil filed a missing person report and kept searching for Ben because he wasn't emotionally ready to face the reality of his death. Slowly, his mind created a false world, a world where a virus existed, people turned infected, and he needed to save Abby from danger. In reality, everyone he hurt was innocent, including his own friend, Mike. Back in the present, Abby tries desperately to bring Neil back to reality, but he can't understand what's real anymore. Right when Neil is about to harm Abby too, John shoots him to protect her. Neil dies from the gunshot. Abby loses her son, and now her husband as well. The movie ends on a dark, tragic note.